Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course on economics of public policy. In our introductory lecture, we discussed what is public policy. Even before discussing public policy, we also discussed what is policy, and then also we tried to understand what are the systems and also economic outcomes and social conditions, how they are interrelated. So, in this lecture, we are going to discuss the policy making process. And here I'd like to begin with the 6 broad steps that are generally followed for public policy making. So to begin with, the first step, which is very challenging and very important, to identify the problem. So here in the steps, we also would like to discuss who are the actors or the participants who make public policy and what are the activities are involved. So when we identify the problems, and this is again not identified by one individual groups or policy makers. So a lot of opinions are taken from all the participants, and the interest groups are like media plays big important role. Also different interest groups, citizen collectives or initiatives, and also public opinion. And then it is it is framed the problem, and then we also demand for the government actions. So this is broadly for the first step. So moving to the second step, when we identify the problems which need to be carried forward as a policy discussion and discourse, the second step is agenda settings. And in the agenda settings is basically what is important is to do is to identify the issues and the problems that needs to be addressed by the government. So here in the agenda also it is very important to understand which are the problems that we want to put it at the first set of priority, and then the ranking. Here actors or the participants who are involved and engaged in agenda settings is elite groups, candidates for elective office, and media also plays important role. So especially elective offices, candidates for elective offices are important because they're the one who will take the policy forward, and therefore even in their agenda for the contesting election is very important that they highlight, and therefore this agenda setting becomes back and forth exercise among various participants, including elective candidates, and also people. Third step, once we identify the problem and set the agenda, then we frame or formulate the policy. And here the activities that is engaged broadly is like developing the proposal to resolve issues and problems, like how to address the problems and how to resolve some of the issues that are identified through problem identifications process and also agenda setting process. And here participants are like all the think tanks which comprises of academia, different institutions, organizations, both including government organization and non-government organizations, and also interest groups. And here different committees are set, and then policies are in details they are discussed through various committee. So now the fourth, steps where policy, legitimization happens through selecting a proposal, because a lot of proposal should be prepared in the policy formulations, and also, also it needs to be sought for political support, and also to understand how to enact into law for each of the problems and the issues that are identified in the policy formulations. And then the participants here are interest groups and the court, since laws are there in the policy legitimation. um, Policy implementation, that is basically comes under the step 5, which is broad step, where how to allocate budget and resources to resolve the issues or the policy. And here budgeting and appropriations are exercises that are practiced, and also organizing various departments and agencies, and then coordination between departments and agencies are taken place. And the participants here are broadly is a very macro, like parliament, different departments in the government, and also different agencies which could be government or non-government. The sixth step, which is very important, because once policy is framed, then policy needs to be critically evaluated, and that is one of the important exercises in the public policy practice and also public policy processes. And therefore each and every policy needs to be monitored and evaluated um, on the targeted groups, on non-target groups, and then also proposing for the reform or the changes, if any. If one policy needs to be changed or needs to be reviewed, or needs to be looked into at a broader context, then it needs to come back through the monitoring and evaluation. And then the participants who are involved in this process is the various departments again, and then think tank, which again includes institutions, various organizations, and most importantly academia, to understand and critically examine the existing policy. And then of course media also plays very important role in this context. So this is the broad 6 steps I'd like to highlight that are taken into account in the policy making process. I have made a pyramid in terms of decision making, who are making the decision. And then you can see like 3 broad groups that I have divided. One is interest groups or elites, who are less in number, but then they have very important stake to framing the policy till executions. So and then the next group that was identified is officials, group of officials, administrators, and the street level bureaucrats, who are not only engaged in public policy deliberations in the policy frame, but they are also important actors or the participants in executing those policies at the ground. And therefore they are important, and their number is less as compared to interest group or elites, who are on the top of this pyramid. The last group is people or the mass, who are beneficiaries, but at the same time very important stakeholder while framing the policy, and also to evaluate the policy. And their number is quite large, because they are the primary stakeholder, and as compared to other broad groups. So now the general question is like whether the approach should be top down, like policies taken on the top level by the elites or the interest group, and then there will be universal or carpet policy for all, and then those policies will be executed by the officials or administrators, and then it will be implemented on the people. And the other approach, or the other way of look into the public policy process is like, bottom up. Like the realization should be there at the mass level by the people, and then it is placed as agenda points, and then demand from the people to the government to frame the policy while identifying the issues. So this two approaches are kind of discussion point for the poverty debate, or poverty alleviation debate, like how we should look into poverty and how it should be eradicated through various policies. So one way to look into, like some policies can be framed, like for instance conditional cash transfer, um, or one can also take the example of non-cash or cash benefits as a form of wage. The other one way to look into, like we'll try to understand the capability of the people who what they want, and then how they spend, and then accordingly we'll just frame. So this is the two ways, way to look into public policy. And sometimes top down approach is workable and lead to a successful public policy, and sometimes bottom up approach is proven to be very effective. So this is the part of the very much public policy debate, and how you frame it. So now the next um, point that I'd like to highlight, that like some of the questions are very important to place at every step of public policy. um, for instance, in problem definitions and agenda settings, or policy formulations, it is important to note that why do perceptions and definitions of policy problems change over time across region or countries. And this is very obvious, because at the beginning years of the public policy, when we frame at the level of policy formulation, the way problem will be identified, that will be different, or it will differ from the earlier years, when we look at the public policy after the implementation, say after 5 years. The same policy and the same demand, same issues that we identified, that will be changed if that particular public policy taken is failed or success in both the cases. Then the next question that is very pertinent is like, why are certain problems ignored while others are placed on the agenda? So this is very important when we set the agenda, and when we give the priority to the problems. And therefore, while giving the priority, some priority will be given more than the others, and therefore ranking the priorities is very important and very natural in the in the public policy processes. At the level of policy formulation and adoption, the first question that comes is like, how do policy decision come about, even following all the processes, and then how can policy outcomes be explained? Like it is very important at the time of framing and then formulations, what are expected outcomes from this particular policy frame, and that is very important. And hypothetically it should be understood at the stage of policy formulations and adoption. At the time of implementations, our question is, why do certain policy fails? So public policies are not meant for only good policies or the successful public policies. If some policies are failing, that is also very important, why it has failed, and how we can rectify, how we can modify, and then further implement with the much more robust way, and also those errors can be corrected. So now in this context, the important point is which factors that actually created an issue in for the variation in public policy implementations. Therefore, failing the public policy is not an important, but then why is it failing, and then which are the factors responsible for this, and then is there any corrective measure for that, or can it be reviewed and modified? If that is possible, then I think not failed policy also can't be seen as bad policy. At the level of evaluation, how can policy effects be measured? So measuring effectiveness of the public policy is very important. And then which factors explain variation in public policy, that also needs to be identified, which actually will give us much more understanding why some policies are successful or how one policy is failing. And then from the successful policy, from the similar policy, can we learn something and then implement further. Having said that, certain parts are there in the public policy debate which is very natural. When many people are involved and many participants are engaged, and therefore argument and bargaining is very natural to have in the whole process. So some policies at the time of discussion, some issues and deliberations can be in favor of public policy or that particular certain policy, and some deliberations will be against of that particular issue. So here argument and the bargaining comes, and there some of the middle path should be taken at the time of framing the public policy. Government is important here in the public policy debate. Whether we follow top down approach or bottom up approach, here people realize the problem and issues that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed through the public policy. And therefore along with the government, entire governance structure is very important. If it is more well networked and also well coordinated, and therefore that policy will be very efficient and also less time consuming. And then the third point that I would like to highlight is rowing and steering the public policy. In the policy frame or making the public policy, in the process, policy and practice and persuasion is a point of discussion. Here media and people and also think tank plays very important role, and therefore puzzles and problems are very much part of the public policy debate. Public policy is conceptualized by various disciplines, and in this particular course we are trying to understand how with the help of economics as a disciplinary lens, we understand problems, formulations, and then identify the issues and how it can be implemented. While saying that, it is important to understand what are the dominant or the broad disciplines that we have. So begin with political science as a discipline, and political scientists, they are the one who actually critically discussed and tried to bring this debate, like public policy has to be the central focus of the discussion when they discussed policy from political science discipline. So political science, as we understand, is a study of political relationships and the processes to allocate political power and the benefits of such power. So if you look back and see the all 6 steps of the public policy processes, here political science as a discipline will give you very interesting way to look into it, because how to allocate resources, but then at the level of allocation of the resources, how allocate political power and how political relationships are. Sociology is a branch of the disciplines, and it gives the social life, and it also gives the way in which we should look into social change and the structure to understand different groups, that includes individuals and social groups, communities and organizations. And community and group activities are important in the policy formulations. So when we say that public policy is framed following top down approach, and there is no community engagement, and then it is not necessarily that particular policy will be kind of successful. So therefore, understanding community, understanding social life is very important, and sociology as a discipline gives much more deeper understanding towards that. So here our point of the discussion is like, for this course, is how economics as a discipline that helps to understand public policy. And 2 points that I would like to highlight is like market plays very important role, and then of course market, it is within the society, and then how goods and services are exchanged even in the policy. This if you look at policy as a goods or commodity, then it is very important like how it should be exchanged, and then where it should take place, and then how resource allocation is distributed and redistributed. And then if you recollect different types of public policy, we discussed about the regulatory public policy and distributive public policy and redistributive public policy. And here economics as a discipline will help us to understand. So economic factors such as growth, productivity, employment, inflation, they influence public policy, and then public policy actually influence these factors. And therefore this is two ways discussion that we are like to highlight. And here this economics discipline will help us. So now moving to the next important discipline, like psychology. Whether it is macro policy or micro policy, decision making is important part of the public policy formulation to executions. And there human behavior or psychological factors play very key role throughout the policy. And therefore psychological factors like decision making behaviors are actually the complementing to the public policy in the whole public policy making process. Legal studies gives the framework of laws, regulations, and actions to implement and achieve social and economic goals. So when we frame the public policy, we frame it for the better outcome, or we have the large goal for the society, and therefore the public policy as a measures. And in that particular context, implementation comes important, and there the framework, legal framework, actually helps in implementing the public policy. So these are the broad 5 disciplines that I would like to highlight. And then while even discussing about the economics of public policy, we would like to also take some of the factors from these disciplines other than economics to understand certain economic problem, or economic as a discipline to address public policy. And we'll try to take the help from sociology. We also try to take the help from psychology to understand how decisions should be made and how it should be implemented within the society and within broad political ecosystem of any nations. So in this lecture I stop here, and then this is a reference 2 chapters from Christoph Neil and Tosun Jail, that public policy and new introduction will be helpful to understand this particular lecture, and I followed this. So thank you so much. I see you in the next lecture.